I was in chemistry class when the announcement came over the intercom. Active threat. This is not a drill. Initiate lockdown. Everyone froze for a second, then we dove under desks as our teacher ran to lock the door and shut off the lights. I ended up crammed next to Anne, who was already crying. Oh God, she kept saying, her whole body shaking against mine. 3 pops echoed from somewhere in the building, unmistakable for what they were, and Anne grabbed my arm so hard her nails drew blood. My best friend Josh had gym this period in the building where the shots came from, but I couldn't think about that now with 32 of us trapped in this dark classroom. That's real, someone whispered. That's actually real. Anne was texting her mom, her hands shaking, telling her she loved her. I needed to do that. More pops, definitely from inside the building, maybe the first floor. Our classroom was on the 2nd floor with only one exit and nowhere to hide if someone got through that door. My sister says there's a shooter in the gym, the kid next to me whispered, showing his phone screen. She's hiding in the equipment closet. The gym. I texted Josh quickly. Are you okay? But the message didn't deliver. We'd had a stupid fight at lunch about him borrowing my car, and I'd called him pathetic in front of everyone. What if those were the last words I ever said to him? 20 minutes in and we heard footsteps running past our door. Everyone held their breath. The handle rattled and someone let out a sob before we heard, "Police! Stay locked down!" And the footsteps continued. "They'll get him," Anne whispered. "They'll stop him." But the girl in front of us turned around and said, "My boyfriend's in the office. He says the shooter knows the building. He's using service hallways and backstairs the cops don't know about." More shots, closer this time, maybe our floor. The walls were so thin we could hear everything, every door being tried, every piece of glass breaking. Someone down the hall was screaming, then suddenly stopped, and the silence was worse than the screaming. "Someone's dead," the girl by the window whispered, reading her phone. "Multiple people shot." "Don't say that," I said, but my voice cracked because the shots kept getting closer and we had nowhere to run. Antonio messaged our group chat. "Has anyone heard from Josh?" "No," 3 people responded. Josh, please be okay." 45 minutes and the sirens were constant, but the shooting hadn't stopped. We could hear it moving through the building like thunder, sometimes distant, sometimes so close we could hear shell casings hit the floor. The fire alarm started blaring, then cut off abruptly, like someone had ripped it from the wall. "He's on the 3rd floor now," someone whispered, reading updates. "Science wing, going room by room." "That's directly above us," Anne said. "He's going to come back down." We could hear movement through the ceiling tiles, deliberate footsteps directly above us, and bits of dust drifted down as the footsteps stopped. It was like he was mapping out the rooms below, planning his route. The girl with the boyfriend kept giving updates. "They're saying he has a list. He's looking for specific people." We heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy and fast, then slow and deliberate. Our hallway. Everyone went completely silent. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. The handle turned, testing it. Someone made a muffled crying sound. The handle turned again, harder, rattling in its frame. Then the footsteps continued and we all exhaled at once. "We're going to die in here," Anne whispered. But after an hour we were still alive, still in total darkness. My legs were cramping from crouching under the desk, but moving seemed more dangerous than pain. Someone said the shooter was wearing a black hoodie and jeans, which described half the school. "He's in the main hallway," the girl with the boyfriend said, moving toward the math wing. The math wing connected to ours. He was coming back. "Turn off your phones," our teacher whispered. "No light, no sound." Complete darkness. I could hear my heartbeat, Anne's ragged breathing, someone praying under their breath, then footsteps getting closer. They stopped at the room next door. A door handle rattled, then breaking glass. We could hear him stepping through, glass crunching under his feet, desks being overturned like he was looking for someone specific. Anne grabbed my hand and squeezed so hard I thought bones might break. The footsteps came closer, stopped right outside our door. The handle turned, locked. A pause. Then 3 loud bangs as something hit the door. The frosted glass window cracked but didn't shatter. We could see a shadow through it, just standing there, waiting. He knew we were in here. He was taking his time. More bangs on the door, harder this time. The glass spiderwebbed. One more hit and he'd be through. The shadow was the right height for a student, not an adult, and something about the posture seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it through the fractured glass. The shadow shifted, raised something toward the glass. This was it. We were going to die in this chemistry classroom. My phone I thought I'd turned off lit up with a text, the sound seeming impossibly loud in the silence. Everyone whispered at me to shut up, but I just stared down at the screen. From Josh. "You shouldn't have said those things at lunch." I looked up at the shadow in the window, at the familiar height, the way the shoulders curved, and realized the black hoodie was the one I'd gotten Josh for his birthday. I stare at the text on my screen, the words blurring as my brain tries to make sense of what I'm seeing. Anne notices the phone light on my face and leans closer, whispering what's wrong. but I can't make my mouth form the words that my best friend since 3rd grade is the person standing outside our door with a gun. My fingers shake so badly I almost dropped the phone twice before I managed to type back to Josh, telling him this isn't him. Please, this isn't who he is, even though the shadow outside the cracked glass proves that's exactly who he became. The 3 dots appear immediately like he was waiting for my response, then disappear, then appear again, and I hold my breath waiting to see what he'll say back to me. The shadow shifts and I hear his footsteps moving away from our door, the sound getting quieter as he heads toward the math wing. And I know from eating lunch with him every day for 6 years that we have maybe 2 minutes before he circles back through the service hallway that connects all the buildings. I make a choice without thinking it through and text Antonio in our group chat, typing as fast as my shaking hands allow that it's Josh. He's wearing a black hoodie. He's moving toward the math wing right now. Forward this to 911 immediately. Antonio replies within seconds with just 2 words, then another message saying he's sending it, and I watch the little status under my message change from delivered to read. Mr. Navarro crawls across the floor toward me, probably ready to take my phone away for having it on during lockdown, but I turn the screen toward him and show him the text exchange with Josh. His face goes completely white in the glow of the screen, all the color draining out like someone pulled a plug. And he looks at me for a long moment before nodding once and whispering that I should keep Josh talking if I can, try to buy time for the police. The fact that my chemistry teacher just told me to negotiate with someone actively shooting people makes me want to throw up right there under the desk. But I swallow hard and type another message asking Josh where he's going, asking him to talk to me. The 3 dots appear and disappear 4 separate times over the next 30 seconds, each time making my heart beat faster because I don't know if he's deciding what to say or deciding whether to come back and shoot through our door. Finally, a message comes through, and I read it 3 times before the words actually make sense in my brain. Coach Henderson is first on his list, then Tyler, who laughed at lunch, then maybe he'll decide about me depending on how he feels. The casual way he lists people like he's telling me his schedule for the day makes him feel like a complete stranger. Someone wearing Josh's face, but not actually Josh at all. I remember Tyler laughing the loudest when I called Josh pathetic in front of everyone at our lunch table. Remember him making jokes about it for the rest of the period. I remember Coach Henderson cutting Josh from JV basketball last month and making some comment about his soft hands in front of the whole team during tryouts. The list makes horrible sense in a way that makes everything worse, because I understand why he picked those names. But that doesn't make it any less scary that my friend spent time writing down who he wanted to hurt and then brought a gun to the school. More shots echo through the building from the direction Josh was heading, and someone in our classroom starts crying loudly enough that Mr. Navarro has to crawl over and cover their mouth with his hand to keep them quiet. I text Josh again, typing that I'm sorry about lunch, that I was being a jerk and Tyler was worse and I should have stood up for him instead of joining in. I tell him please don't hurt anyone else, please just stop, because maybe if I give him what he wants, then he'll put the gun down. The dots appear again, and I hold my breath so hard my chest starts to hurt, waiting for his response and hoping it means he's not shooting anyone right this second. His next message comes through and it's longer than the others, asking if I really think sorry fixes everything, asking if one apology makes up for 3 years of me getting cooler while he stayed the loser everyone made fun of. I read it twice and realized with a sick feeling in my stomach that this isn't about lunch at all. This is about me making varsity soccer. While he got cut from every team he tried out for, about me dating Emma while he couldn't get anyone to go to homecoming with him, about me having a whole group of friends while he ate lunch alone more days than I ever noticed. I'd been so focused on my own life and my own friends that I never saw Josh drowning right next to me, never noticed him disappearing a little more each day. Police radios crackle somewhere close to our hallway, and I hear someone shout that the suspect is heading toward the athletics offices, which means they got Antonio's message and they're tracking where Josh is going. I text him again asking where he is right now, asking if he's safe, trying to keep him talking like Mr. Navarro said. Josh responds asking since when I care about whether he's safe, and the bitterness in those words hits harder than any of the mean things I said at lunch. I hear footsteps running in the hallway outside, heavy boots that sound like cops or SWAT, and then a single gunshot followed by someone screaming that an officer is down. My whole body goes cold because Josh just shot a cop, which means this doesn't end with him getting help or going to therapy. This ends with him dead or in prison for the rest of his life. Anne grabs my arm again, her nails digging into my skin, and whispers asking if he's really going to kill us. I don't know how to answer because the Josh I knew wouldn't hurt anyone, but that Josh apparently stopped existing somewhere between freshman year and today, replaced by whoever is out in that hallway with a gun. I text him to please just stop, to turn himself in, that this doesn't have to get worse, even though we both know it's already as bad as it possibly gets. The dots appear and disappear over and over for almost a full minute, the longest minute of my entire life, before Josh finally responds asking if I'm still in Mr. Navarro's room, asking if I'm in the second-floor chemistry lab. My blood turns to ice because he's confirming exactly where I am, which means he's still thinking about coming back for me, still deciding whether I'm on his list or not. Mr. Navarro sees the message over my shoulder and immediately starts moving students toward the supply closet in the back corner. the only spot in the whole classroom that doesn't have windows or a direct line from the door. I type back, yes, but please don't come here. The cops are everywhere now. He can't win this. Josh's response comes through almost immediately, saying he's not trying to win. He's just trying to make people feel what he felt. I finally understand that this was never about escape or having some master plan. This is about making us hurt the way he's been hurting, about forcing everyone to see him, even if it's the last thing any of us ever see. I forward his last 3 messages to Antonio, with a note saying to send them to the police, saying Josh is talking about coming to the chemistry lab. Antonio confirms he's already on a call with 911 dispatch, and they're sending units to our floor right now. Heavy boots pound up the stairwell right outside our classroom, and I hear someone shout into a radio about SWAT moving to the 2nd floor. That means they're setting up around where Josh last sent his location, which means they know he's close to us. Navarro waves frantically at students still under desks and points toward the supply closet in the back corner. He's already got 15 people crammed in there, and he's trying to fit more when we hear glass breaking in the classroom next door. Josh is back on our floor. We can hear him breathing hard between the sounds of desks being shoved across tile, like he's searching for someone specific and getting more angry with each empty space. My phone buzzes in my hand, and I look down to see a new text from Josh. It's a photo taken from inside our dark hallway, showing our classroom door with its spider web of cracks spreading across the frosted glass. The caption reads, "I can see your teacher's desk from here. The periodic table poster is crooked, and my stomach drops because he's proving he's right outside, proving he knows exactly where we are and what we can see." I type back with shaking fingers, "That poster's been crooked since September. You helped me hang it for Navarro during lunch detention, remember?" I'm trying to remind him we were friends once, that we used to help each other with stupid stuff like hanging posters and covering for each other when we were late. The 3 dots appear at the bottom of my screen, and they stay there for what feels like forever. Anne is watching my phone over my shoulder, and she whispers asking what he's saying, but I just shake my head because I don't know yet. Finally, Josh's response comes through and it says, "You got detention for spray painting the parking lot." I got detention for being in the wrong place. We were never the same, and he's completely right about that. I was the one who actually broke the rules, who thought it would be funny to paint our class year in huge numbers across 3 parking spaces. Josh just happened to be standing there when the principal came out. I took detention for a week, but Josh took it too because he wouldn't rat me out, and I never thought about how unfair that was until right now. I text back, "You're right. I got away with stuff and you took the blame. That wasn't fair. But this won't fix it." And I watch the message change from sending to delivered. Before Josh can respond, something explodes somewhere close, a sound so loud my ears ring and Anne screams. I hear someone yelling, "Suspect spotted south stairwell," followed by boots running fast and radios crackling with overlapping voices. Josh texts, "Gotta go." Cops finally figured out the back stairs, and the tone is almost joking, like this is just a game of hide and seek instead of him killing people. I type as fast as I can, "Please just give up. I'll visit you. I'll testify you were bullied. I'll do whatever helps. Because maybe if he knows someone will stand up for him in court, he'll stop this." The message shows delivered, but it never changes to read. 3 more gunshots ring out from the direction of the south stairwell, followed by someone screaming, "Shots fired! Officer needs medical!" And then a heavy sound like something big hitting the floor. The radio chatter becomes crazy with multiple voices talking over each other about securing a suspect and calling for paramedics and setting up a perimeter. My phone stays completely silent. No new messages from Josh. I don't know if that means they caught him or shot him, or if he's just done talking to me. Anne is crying again next to me, and Navarro is trying to keep everyone quiet in the supply closet. We wait in total darkness for another 10 minutes that feel like 10 hours. Then someone pounds on our door and shouts, "Police! We have the suspect in custody. Prepare for evacuation." But Navarro makes us wait. No. He crawls to the door and looks through the broken glass, checking for badges and uniforms before he finally unlocks it. 2 SWAT officers in full gear with rifles come in and sweep the room, checking every corner and under every desk before one of them gives us the all-clear signal. They tell us to line up single file for evacuation and to keep our hands visible at all times. We file out into a hallway that looks like a war zone. There's broken glass everywhere crunching under our feet, bullet holes in the walls, dark stains on the floor that I force myself not to look at too closely because I don't want to know if they're blood or something worse. The SWAT team guides us toward the main stairwell, keeping us away from whatever's happening at the south stairs where they caught Josh. Anne grabs my hand and squeezes so tight my fingers go numb, but I don't pull away because I need something to hold on to as much as she does. As we turn the corner toward the stairs, I see them. 4 officers surrounding someone on the ground in a black hoodie with their hands cuffed behind their back. Josh's face is pressed against the tile, and there's blood on his temple, but his eyes are open. They're scanning the hallway like he's still looking for someone. For just a second, our eyes meet across the distance, and I see my best friend looking back at me. He looks scared and broken and so impossibly young lying there in handcuffs. Then an officer steps in front of me and pushes our line forward, blocking my view. The walk down the stairs and through the main hallway feels like it takes forever, even though it's probably only 3 minutes. We pass Coach Henderson's office and I can see paramedics working on someone inside. I force myself not to look because I don't want to know if Josh got the first name on his list. The front doors have been propped open, and sunlight streams in so bright after being in the dark that several students stumble and have to shield their eyes. The parking lot has been completely transformed into a command center. There are ambulances everywhere with their lights flashing, fire trucks, police cars forming a perimeter around the whole school, news vans with satellite dishes already set up along the street. They guide us to a specific area where crisis counselors in bright yellow vests are waiting with blankets and bottles of water. Anne spots her mom in the crowd of parents behind the police tape and starts crying again, but this time it's different. This time it's relief. I pull out my phone and the screen lights up with 17 missed calls from my mom. The texts start with, "Are you okay?" Around the time the lockdown began, and get more frantic with each one. "Please answer," and "Where are you?" and finally, "Please answer. Please be alive." My hands shake as I hit call. She answers before the first ring finishes, and I hear her sobbing so hard she can't form words. I tell her I'm okay, and I'm outside, and I'm safe. My dad's voice cuts in from the background asking if it's really me. I repeat that I'm fine and they say they're coming to get me, but the police checkpoints are backed up for miles. While I wait, I watch ambulances pull away from the main entrance with their sirens blaring. I count 4 of them before I force myself to stop counting, because each one means someone didn't make it out walking. The girl who was sitting by the window in our classroom stands near the police tape talking to a news reporter. I hear her say we thought we were all going to die before a police officer steps between them and pushes the camera crew back behind the barrier. The parking lot feels like chaos with parents crying and students wrapped in blankets and reporters shouting questions at anyone who will listen. Antonio finds me in the crowd and pulls me into a hug without saying anything. We just stand there holding on to each other because there aren't words for what we just survived. A detective in a dark suit approaches us with a female officer beside him. He introduces himself as Detective Jared Morgan and asks if I'm injured. I shake my head, and he asks if I'm willing to answer some questions about my communications with the suspect. I nod because what else am I going to say? He leads me away from the crisis counselor area toward a big white mobile command unit parked near the fire trucks. Inside, they've set up a temporary interview space with folding chairs and recording equipment on a small table. Detective Morgan gestures for me to sit, and the female officer stands by the door. He asks me to walk through every text exchange with Josh from the moment I realized it was him. My hands shake as I unlock my phone and show him the messages. He photographs each one with his own phone before asking me to email the full thread to an evidence account he writes on a card. He explains that my texts might have saved lives by keeping Josh engaged and helping police track his location through the cell towers. That makes me feel worse instead of better because I was just trying to save myself and everyone in that classroom. I wasn't thinking about being a hero or helping the police. I was terrified and texting the person who was trying to kill us. Detective Morgan asks about my relationship with Josh, and I tell him everything. The lunch fight where I called him pathetic in front of everyone. The years of us drifting apart as I made varsity soccer and got other friends while he ate lunch alone. Coach Henderson cutting him from JV basketball and making that joke about his soft hands. The social isolation I'd been too self-absorbed to notice until it was way too late. He takes notes in a small notebook without any judgment on his face. When I start crying, talking about calling Josh pathetic, he hands me a tissue box and just waits patiently for me to pull myself together. Finally, he asks if Josh ever talked about violence or showed me weapons. I say no, which is the truth, but it feels like a lie because I should have seen something. There should have been warning signs I missed. After the interview, Detective Morgan asks if I consent to having my phone imaged for evidence. I agree because what choice do I have? A tech in a police uniform takes my phone to a van full of computer equipment. He returns it 20 minutes later with instructions not to delete anything. The detective gives me his card and tells me I'll probably need to testify eventually. He thanks me for my cooperation and lets me go find my parents. My mom and dad are waiting right outside the command unit. My mom grabs me so hard I can barely breathe, and my dad keeps touching my face like he's checking I'm real and solid. They ask if I'm hurt, and I say no, even though I don't think I'll ever feel not hurt again. We walk to their car past news cameras and other parents still waiting for their kids. I wonder how many students won't be walking out, how many parents will drive home with empty car seats. The drive home is silent except for my mom's occasional sobs from the passenger seat. My dad keeps looking at me in the rearview mirror like I might disappear if he looks away. When we pull into our driveway, I see our neighbors standing on their porch watching us. I realize this is going to be my life now. Being the kid who was in the shooting. Being the kid whose best friend did it. My phone buzzes constantly with texts from people I haven't talked to in months, all asking if I'm okay. Inside the house, I head straight for my room, but my parents stop me. They say they want me where they can see me. We sit in the living room with the TV on mute showing aerial footage of our school surrounded by emergency vehicles. The news banner scrolls names of confirmed casualties at the bottom of the screen. I see Coach Henderson listed as deceased. Then Tyler Morrison, who sat 2 rows behind me in English. Josh got 2 people on his list before they stopped him. My phone rings and it's Antonio asking if I've seen the group chat. I open it to find complete chaos. People arguing about whether we should have fought back. People sharing videos they took during the lockdown. People blaming Josh's parents and the school and bullying and gun laws and everything except Josh himself. Someone posts asking if anyone else knew Josh was planning this. 3 people respond tagging me and asking if I knew since we were best friends. I stare at their messages and feel sick because now everyone thinks I might have known. Like I could have stopped this if I'd just paid more attention or been a better friend or done literally anything different. I opened the group chat again and my fingers shook as I typed back. I didn't know anything. I'm as shocked as everyone else. But even as I hit send, the words felt wrong, like I was defending myself when 2 people were dead. Someone named Clark, who I barely knew from gym class, responded immediately. But you were texting him during the shooting. What did he say? 3 more people jumped in asking the same thing, and I watched the messages pile up faster than I could read them. Sarah from English asked if Josh had seemed different lately, and Miguel wanted to know if I'd seen warning signs, and suddenly everyone was treating me like I should have known, like I could have stopped this if I'd just paid better attention. My phone buzzed with notification after notification, and I couldn't breathe looking at all those questions and accusations. I closed the group chat without responding again and held down the power button until my phone went black. The silence in the living room felt heavy after all that buzzing, and I realized my hands were still shaking. My mom was watching me from across the room, and I could see she wanted to ask what was wrong, but she didn't say anything. An hour later, my mom called us to dinner, even though none of us wanted to eat. We sat at the kitchen table with plates of pasta that my mom had made on autopilot, the same meal she always made when she didn't know what else to do. I pushed a meatball around my plate and watched the red sauce make patterns on the white ceramic. My dad cut his spaghetti into smaller and smaller pieces, but never actually put any in his mouth. My mom took one bite and then just held her fork in the air like she'd forgotten what to do with it. The clock on the wall ticked so loud I wanted to rip it down, and the refrigerator hummed, and outside I could hear a car drive past our house. Finally, my dad put down his fork and looked at me. Do you want to talk about it? I shook my head because how could I explain any of this? How do I tell my parents that my best friend killed Coach Henderson, who used to give me rides home from practice? How do I explain that Tyler Morrison is dead, and I'd just seen him in English class yesterday complaining about the homework? How do I make them understand that part of me keeps seeing Josh as the kid who helped me build a treehouse in 5th grade, the kid who came to my birthday parties, and knew all my secrets, instead of the person who brought a gun to the school and shot people? I couldn't find words for any of it, so I just shook my head again, and my dad nodded like he understood, even though nobody could understand this. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Josh's face pressed against the hallway floor, with his hands cuffed behind his back. I heard the gunshots echoing through the building, and Anne's panicked breathing next to me under the desk, and the sound of glass breaking as Josh moved through the classrooms looking for people on his list. My brain kept replaying the moment our eyes met when the police were leading me past him, and I saw my best friend looking back at me scared and broken and so young. I rolled over and checked my clock, and it was only 11:30, even though it felt like I'd been lying there for hours. I tried counting backwards from 100 like my mom taught me when I was little, and couldn't sleep, but I kept losing count around 70. At midnight, I heard my parents talking in low voices down the hall, and then their door closing. At 1:15, I heard a siren go past our house, and my whole body tensed up thinking about ambulances and police cars surrounding the school. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleeping and went downstairs as quietly as I could. My dad was sitting on the couch in the dark living room with the TV on mute showing news coverage of the shooting. Aerial shots of our school surrounded by emergency vehicles and crime scene tape. Photos of Coach Henderson and Tyler that their families must have given to the news stations. My dad looked up when I came down the stairs, and he didn't seem surprised to see me. He patted the couch next to him, and I sat down, and we both stared at the TV without saying anything. A reporter was standing in front of the school talking into a microphone, and the caption said something about the suspect being held without bail. They showed a picture of Josh from the yearbook, from before everything went wrong, when he still smiled in photos. My dad reached over and muted the TV completely, so we sat in total silence watching the images flash across the screen. The sun started coming up around 6 a.m., turning the sky outside our window from black to gray to pale orange. My dad finally spoke and asked if I wanted breakfast, but I shook my head. We just sat there together as the morning light filled the room and the news coverage continued on the silent TV. The next morning, my mom came downstairs and found us both still on the couch. She'd been crying again. I could tell from her red eyes and the tissue she was holding. She turned on her phone and read something, and then told us the school district had announced classes were canceled for the rest of the week. Crisis counselors would be available at the community center starting this afternoon for any students who needed to talk. She looked at me and said she thought I should go, even though I really didn't want to face anyone from the school. I started to argue, but she just shook her head and said it wasn't up for discussion. She said I needed to talk to someone professional about what I'd been through, and she was right even if I didn't want to admit it. My dad offered to drive me, and I nodded because I didn't trust myself to drive after not sleeping. We got in the car around noon, and the community center parking lot was already packed with cars and news vans when we arrived. I saw students from the school walking in with their parents, and everyone had the same shell-shocked look on their faces. Some kids were crying, and some just stared straight ahead like zombies. I recognized Emma from my English class walking in with her mom, and Antonio's car was parked near the entrance. Inside the community center, they'd transformed the gymnasium into a crisis counseling area, with folding tables set up as stations and different counselors sitting at each one. Someone gave my dad a clipboard with forms to fill out, and we sat in plastic chairs against the wall waiting our turn. The room smelled like industrial cleaner, and there were too many people talking in low voices. A woman called my name after about 20 minutes and introduced herself as Cecilia Roberts. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she didn't look at me with pity or suspicion, just patience. She led me to a private office down the hall away from all the noise and gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair while she sat across from me. She didn't push me to talk right away, just waited while I stared at my hands. Finally, she asked me to tell her what I was feeling, and I said guilty because that was the only word that made sense. She asked what I felt guilty about, and I started listing everything. The fight at lunch where I called Josh pathetic in front of everyone. Not noticing that Josh was in pain and planning something terrible. Texting him during the shooting instead of just staying silent. Surviving when Coach Henderson and Tyler didn't. Being Josh's friend all these years and never seeing this coming. The list kept growing, and I realized I felt guilty about basically everything. Cecilia listened to my whole story without interrupting once. I told her about growing up with Josh and how we'd been best friends since elementary school. I told her about how we'd drifted apart in high school when I made varsity soccer and started dating Emma and had other friends while Josh got more and more isolated. I told her about the lunch fight and calling him pathetic and how Tyler had laughed the loudest. I told her about being under the desk in chemistry class and getting Josh's text and realizing my best friend was the shooter. I told her about texting him trying to keep him talking and forwarding messages to Antonio, who sent them to 911. I told her about seeing Josh on the floor in handcuffs and the look in his eyes. When I finally stopped talking, Cecilia was quiet for a minute, and then she said something that surprised me. You didn't pull the trigger. Josh made his own choices. Your words at lunch were unkind, but they didn't cause this. She explained that school shooters plan their actions over time, sometimes for weeks or months. They look for justifications and excuses, but the decision to bring a gun and hurt people is entirely their own. She said if it wasn't my insult at lunch, it would have been something else because Josh was already on that path. I wanted to believe her, but the guilt still sat in my chest like a heavy stone that wouldn't move. We spent the next 30 minutes working on grounding techniques for when I started panicking. Cecilia taught me to focus on 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. She said this would help pull me back to the present when my brain started replaying the shooting. She gave me a journal and told me to write down thoughts I couldn't say out loud, especially the scary or confusing ones. She explained that trauma responses were completely normal, and I shouldn't be surprised if I had nightmares or trouble concentrating or sudden crying spells or anger outbursts. She said healing wasn't linear, and some days would be harder than others. Before I left, she scheduled me for twice-weekly sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and gave me her emergency number in case I needed to talk between appointments. She walked me back to the waiting room where my dad was filling out insurance paperwork, and she shook his hand and told him I was very brave. Outside the community center, a reporter spotted me and started walking over with a cameraman following behind. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and too much makeup, and a microphone with a news station logo on it. She called out asking if I could comment on my friendship with the shooter. My dad immediately stepped between us and told her to back off, but she kept calling out questions. Did you have any warning signs? Do you feel responsible for not stopping him? My dad put his arm around my shoulders and guided me toward our car, while the reporter kept shouting questions. I kept my head down and walked faster and tried not to cry, because I didn't want to give them footage of me breaking down. We got in the car, and my dad locked the doors, and I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My phone buzzed with a text from Antonio. Don't talk to reporters. They're trying to make us look bad for not stopping him. I texted back that I hadn't said anything, and he sent a thumbs-up emoji. That evening, my parents asked if I wanted to go to the vigil at the town park for Coach Henderson and Tyler. I said yes because it felt like something I should do, even though I was scared of facing their families. We drove to the park around 7 p.m., and it was already packed with students holding candles and photos of the victims. Someone had set up a table with flowers and teddy bears and cards. Tyler's girlfriend Jessica was standing near the front, sobbing so hard she could barely stand, and 2 of her friends were holding her up. Coach Henderson's wife was sitting in a wheelchair looking completely broken, and their adult daughter stood behind her with her hands on her mother's shoulders. The principal gave a speech about loss and community and healing, but I couldn't really focus on the words. People were crying everywhere I looked, and the candles created little pools of light in the growing darkness. I stood at the back of the crowd trying to be invisible, but I saw people pointing at me and whispering. A woman I didn't know walked over, and I could see anger in her eyes before she even opened her mouth. Are you the one who was texting with him? When I nodded, she asked if I tried to stop him. I said yes because I had tried. I'd texted him and kept him talking and forwarded messages to the police. But she just shook her head and walked away like my answer wasn't good enough, like I should have done more somehow. I realized standing there in the park that some people would always blame me for not stopping Josh. They would always wonder if I could have prevented this if I'd just been a better friend, or noticed the warning signs, or said the right thing at lunch. I would probably always wonder the same thing. Crowd and candles created this weird moving light that made everyone's faces look strange and unfamiliar. I left before the speeches ended because I couldn't handle another person asking me questions or looking at me like I was either a hero or a failure. My parents drove me home in silence, and I went straight to my room and stayed there for the rest of the weekend. On Monday morning, Detective Morgan called to remind me about the preliminary hearing on Wednesday. He said I needed to wear something nice and be at the courthouse by 9. My mom took me shopping for dress pants and a button-up shirt that felt wrong on my body, like I was playing dress-up for something serious. Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about facing Josh in court and having to read our texts out loud and explaining to a room full of strangers why I didn't stop my best friend from killing people. Wednesday morning arrived too fast. My dad drove me to the courthouse, and the parking lot was already packed with news vans and protesters holding signs. Some signs said things like justice for the victims, and others said mental health, not jail time. We had to push through a crowd of reporters shouting questions at us. My dad kept his hand on my back, guiding me toward the entrance. Inside the courthouse, Detective Morgan met us and walked us to a witness waiting room. He explained that I would be called to testify after they established the basic facts of the case. The room had uncomfortable chairs and old magazines and a water cooler that made weird gurgling sounds. We waited for almost 2 hours before someone came to get me. The bailiff led me down a long hallway to the courtroom doors. He told me to wait until they called my name. I could hear muffled voices inside, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to shove them in my pockets. Then the door opened and the bailiff nodded at me. I walked into a courtroom packed with people. Josh's parents sat in the front row on one side. Coach Henderson's wife was in a wheelchair on the other side with Tyler's parents next to her. I recognized students from the school scattered throughout the gallery. Reporters filled the back rows with notebooks and recording devices. Josh sat at the defense table wearing an orange jumpsuit that made him look small and young, and nothing like the person who shot up our school. His lawyer sat next to him in an expensive-looking suit. Josh's eyes found mine as I walked down the aisle, and I saw fear in them. The bailiff directed me to the witness stand. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Sitting down, I could feel everyone staring at me. Some people looked sympathetic. Others looked angry. I couldn't tell which reaction was worse. The prosecutor stood up and introduced herself. She asked me to state my name for the record. Then she asked how I knew Josh. I explained we had been best friends since elementary school. We used to build forts in my backyard and ride bikes to the convenience store and play video games until late at night. But in high school, we drifted apart. I made the soccer team. Josh got cut from basketball. I started dating and going to parties. Josh ate lunch alone most days. The prosecutor asked me to describe our relationship on the day of the shooting. I told her about the fight at lunch. Josh wanted to borrow my car. I said no because he still owed me money from last time. He got upset and I called him pathetic in front of everyone. Tyler and some other guys laughed. Josh just walked away without saying anything. The prosecutor pulled out printed copies of our text messages. She asked me to read them out loud. I read Josh's first text. "You shouldn't have said those things at lunch." Then my response. "Josh, please, this isn't you." His next message. "Coach Henderson, then that jerk Tyler from lunch, then maybe I'll decide about you." The courtroom was completely silent as I read. My voice cracked on some of the words. The prosecutor asked what I was thinking when I sent my responses. I said I was terrified and trying to keep him talking. I thought if I could keep him on his phone, then maybe he wouldn't hurt more people. I forwarded his messages to Antonio, who sent them to the police. I was hoping they could use the information to find him faster. The prosecutor asked if I thought my texts helped. I said I didn't know. Maybe they bought some time. Maybe they helped the police track his location. Or maybe I should have said something different that would have made him stop. She told me I did the right thing and thanked me for my testimony. Then the defense attorney stood up. He was older, with gray hair and a kind face that didn't match what he was about to do. He asked if Josh had ever been violent before that day. I said no. He asked if Josh had ever threatened anyone. I said no. He asked if Josh had been bullied. I said yes. By who, he asked. I listed names including Tyler Morrison and some guys on the basketball team. He asked if I had ever bullied Josh. I wanted to say no, but I was under oath. I said yes at lunch the day of the shooting. He asked what I said. I repeated the word pathetic and watched Josh's mom start crying in the gallery. The defense attorney asked if I knew about Josh's mental health struggles. I said I knew he seemed sad lately, but I didn't know the details. He asked if I thought Josh was mentally stable on the day of the shooting. The prosecutor jumped up and objected. The judge sustained the objection. The defense attorney smiled like he had made his point anyway. He thanked me and sat down. The judge told me I could step down. My legs shook so badly walking back to my seat that I almost tripped. My dad grabbed my arm to steady me. The rest of the hearing continued with other witnesses and evidence, but I couldn't focus on any of it. After about an hour, the judge called a recess. Everyone stood as the judge left. I walked out into the hallway needing air. Olive Nolan was standing near the water fountain. When she saw me, she walked over. She thanked me for being honest up there. She said I didn't try to make Josh look worse than he was. She explained that the lawyer was building a case that Josh had a mental break and wasn't in control of his actions. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to believe it was true. The Josh I grew up with wouldn't have done this if he was thinking clearly. But another part of me knew he had planned it. He made a list. He brought a gun. He knew exactly what he was doing, even if he was in pain. Olive touched my arm gently and said she didn't blame me for testifying. Then she walked back into the courtroom. After the recess, the judge returned and announced his ruling. There was enough evidence for trial. He set a court date for 3 months away. Josh was denied bail. He would stay in juvenile detention until he turned 18 in 2 months, then transfer to county jail. The bailiff told Josh to stand. They put handcuffs on him right there in the courtroom. As they led him toward the side door, he looked back at me one more time. His lips moved, forming the words, "I'm sorry," but no sound came out. I didn't know if he meant sorry for the shooting or sorry for dragging me into this, or sorry for our friendship ending this way. Then he was gone through the door. The next day back at the school, everything felt different. Some kids came up to me in the hallway saying I was brave for testifying. Others whispered and pointed and turned away when I looked at them. By lunch, someone had spray-painted the word snitch across my locker in red paint. The principal called me to the office. She said they were reviewing security footage to find who did it. She asked if I felt safe at the school. I said I didn't know. She assigned me a different locker and said to report any threats immediately. Antonio and Anne found me after school. They said people were choosing sides about whether Josh deserved sympathy or punishment. Some students thought I betrayed him by helping the prosecution. Others thought I did what I had to do. Antonio said to ignore all of it. Anne said she was proud of me for telling the truth. But I could feel friendships cracking apart around me. People I used to eat lunch with suddenly had other plans. Kids I studied with stopped texting back. The shooting had divided our school into camps, and I was stuck in the middle. That week in therapy, Cecilia asked how I felt about testifying. I said guilty. She asked why. I explained that I helped prosecute my former best friend. I read his texts out loud in court. I admitted I bullied him. Now he was going to prison, partly because of my testimony. Cecilia leaned forward and said something that surprised me. She said I could acknowledge Josh's pain and mental health struggles while still holding him accountable for his choices. Both things could be true at the same time. He was suffering and he killed people. He was bullied and he made a choice to bring a gun to the school. My words at lunch were cruel, and they didn't cause the shooting. She said I needed to separate what I was responsible for from what Josh was responsible for. I was responsible for being a bad friend sometimes. Josh was responsible for murder. Over the next few weeks, Detective Morgan called several times to prepare me for the actual trial. He said the defense would argue Josh was bullied into a mental breakdown. My testimony about our friendship and the lunch fight would be important. The prosecutor wanted me to emphasize that Josh planned the attack. He had a list of targets. He used service hallways the police didn't know about. He texted me about his plans. All of that showed thinking ahead, not a spontaneous break. Detective Morgan said I needed to be ready for hard questions from both sides. 2 days before the trial started, Josh's lawyer called my house. My dad answered, and I could hear him getting angry. The lawyer was asking if I would testify for the defense about Josh's mental state and the bullying he experienced. My dad said absolutely not and hung up. But I thought about it. Part of me wanted people to understand that Josh wasn't a monster. He was a broken kid who made terrible, unforgivable choices. He was my best friend who I watched slowly fall apart while I was too busy with my own life to notice. But I also knew he killed Coach Henderson and Tyler Morrison. He shot at police. He traumatized hundreds of students. In the end, I decided I could only testify to what I saw and let the lawyers argue about what it meant. The trial started on a Monday and lasted 3 days. The courtroom was even more packed than the preliminary hearing. I testified on the second day for almost 4 hours. The prosecutor asked detailed questions about Josh's behavior leading up to the shooting. Did he seem depressed? Yes. Did he talk about weapons? Number. Did he mention the people he targeted? Not directly, but I knew he was angry at them. The defense attorney asked about the bullying in detail. He made me describe every mean thing I said to Josh over the years, every time I chose other friends over him, every party I went to without inviting him. He asked if I thought Josh felt invisible at the school. I said probably yes. He asked if I thought Josh felt like he had no other way to be seen. The prosecutor objected. The judge allowed it. I said I didn't know what Josh was thinking. I only knew what he did. Then they had me read the texts again. This time, the prosecutor asked me to explain what each message revealed about Josh's planning. I pointed out that he knew where I was. He knew the building layout. He had specific targets. He was tracking police movements. All of that required thinking ahead. The defense attorney asked if fear and trauma could cause someone to think ahead while still being in a mental health crisis. I said I didn't know. I wasn't a doctor. The jury listened to everything carefully. Some of them took notes. Others just stared at Josh or at me. I couldn't tell what they were thinking. When I finally stepped down, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and my throat hurt from talking so much. My dad drove me home, and I slept for 12 hours straight. The next morning, my dad drove me back to the courthouse for the verdict. The jury had been out for 6 hours, and everyone said that was a bad sign for Josh because quick verdicts usually mean not guilty, and long ones mean the jury is convinced but working through the details. We sat in the same courtroom as before with Josh at the defense table in his orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I remembered. The judge came in and asked if the jury had reached a verdict, and the foreman stood up and said yes, they had. The clerk read the charges one by one, and after each one, the foreman said guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder for Coach Henderson, guilty of first-degree murder for Tyler Morrison, guilty of attempted murder of a police officer, guilty on all the other charges too, every single one. Josh didn't move or react at all, just stared straight ahead like he was watching something far away that nobody else could see. But behind him in the gallery, Olive Nolan made a sound like all the air got punched out of her lungs and collapsed forward, sobbing, so hard the bailiff had to help her stay in her seat. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them, then set a sentencing hearing for 2 weeks later. He said Josh was facing life in prison with possibility of parole after 25 years, and since he'd be 18 by then, he'd go to adult prison, not juvenile. My mom squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I barely felt it because I was watching Josh get led out in handcuffs while his mom cried, and the victims' families sat stone-faced in their row. 2 weeks later, we were back for sentencing, and this time the courtroom was even more packed. Coach Henderson's wife went first for the victim impact statements. She talked about their 30 years of marriage and how he'd coached hundreds of kids and how she had to plan his funeral instead of their retirement. She cried the whole time, but kept reading from her paper in this shaky voice that made everyone in the room cry with her. Then Tyler's parents got up and his dad could barely speak, so his mom did most of the talking. She said Tyler wanted to be a teacher and work with kids and he'd never get that chance now. She said they had to bury their son at 17, and that pain would never go away no matter what happened to Josh. The prosecutor stood up after them and asked for the maximum sentence. He said Josh planned the attack, targeted specific people, and showed no remorse until after he got caught. Josh's lawyer argued for leniency because of Josh's age and mental health issues. He said Josh had been bullied and isolated and reached a breaking point, and that he deserved a chance at rehabilitation someday. Then the judge looked at Josh and asked if he wanted to speak. Josh stood up slowly and pulled out a piece of paper that shook in his hands. He read from it in this quiet voice that barely carried to the back of the room. He said he was sorry to the victims' families, and he thought about what he did every single day. He said he was in a dark place and made terrible choices, but he knew that didn't excuse anything. He said he hoped someday he could do something meaningful with his life to honor the people he hurt. His voice cracked multiple times while he read, and by the end he was crying, so hard he could barely get the words out. The judge let him finish and sit down, then took a few minutes to review his notes before speaking. He sentenced Josh to 40 years in prison with possibility of parole after 25 years. Josh didn't react to that either, just nodded once like he'd been expecting it. They let him out, and this time he looked at me as he passed and mouthed something I couldn't understand. After the sentencing, I sat in my dad's car in the courthouse parking lot, feeling this weird mix of relief and sadness. Justice had been served like everyone kept saying, but Coach Henderson and Tyler were still dead. Josh would spend most of his life in prison, but that didn't erase the trauma for me or Anne or anyone else who survived. Detective Morgan found me before we left and told me I did the right thing by testifying. He said my cooperation helped ensure accountability, and I should be proud of that. I thanked him, but I didn't feel proud or like a hero. I just felt tired and sad and ready for everything to be over, even though I knew it never really would be. In the weeks after the trial, I tried to focus on moving forward. I went back to my twice-weekly sessions with Cecilia, and we worked on accepting that I did everything I could during the shooting and afterward. She kept saying I couldn't have prevented Josh's choices no matter what I did or said. I helped minimize the harm by keeping him engaged and sharing information with police. She made me repeat this thing about how carrying appropriate responsibility is different from carrying crushing guilt. The guilt wanted me to believe I caused the shooting by calling Josh pathetic at lunch. The responsibility meant acknowledging I said something mean, but understanding Josh made his own choice to bring a gun to the school. Some days I believed her, and some days the guilt won. Anne and I ended up growing closer through everything we'd been through together. We started studying together after school and talking about our fears and triggers. She was seeing her own therapist, and sometimes we'd compare notes about coping strategies that worked or didn't work. The weird thing was we'd barely known each other before the shooting, and now she was one of the only people who really understood what it felt like. Sometimes we'd go sit in the chemistry lab after school just to prove to ourselves we could be in that room without panicking. Mr. Navarro would let us stay as long as we needed and never ask questions or made it weird. He'd just work at his desk grading papers while we sat there breathing through the anxiety until it got manageable. Antonio organized this group of survivors who started meeting weekly at the community center. There were 12 of us total who'd been in the lockdown or directly affected by the shooting. We didn't have any formal agenda or structure, just showed up and shared how we were doing and supported each other through the hard days. Some days we talked about the shooting and processed what happened. Other days we deliberately talked about anything else, movies or sports or college plans, because we needed to remember we were more than just survivors. The group became this lifeline for all of us, the one place we could be completely honest about struggling without people telling us to move on or get over it. 6 weeks after the sentencing, the school held a memorial dedication ceremony. They'd installed this garden in the courtyard with 2 benches that had Coach Henderson's and Tyler's names engraved on them. The principal gave a speech about resilience and community and honoring their memory by being kind to each other. Tyler's sister planted a tree in the garden and could barely get through it without breaking down. Coach Henderson's wife donated new equipment to the athletics program in his name. It was sad, but also healing in this weird way to honor them publicly and have a physical place to remember them. A few days after the ceremony, I got a letter forwarded through Detective Morgan from Josh in prison. He wrote that he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again, but he wanted me to know he was getting mental health treatment and working on understanding why he did what he did. He said he thought about our friendship often and wished he had talked to me about his pain instead of letting it build into rage. He didn't ask for forgiveness or anything like that, just said he hoped someday I could remember the good times we had without them being poisoned by what he became. I read the letter 3 times sitting on my bed trying to figure out how I felt about it. I ended up filing it away in my desk drawer, not ready to respond but not ready to throw it away either. As the school year finally ended, I realized I'd survived something I never thought I could survive. I still had hard days where loud noises made me panic, or I'd dream about being trapped under that desk listening to gunshots. But I also had good days where I laughed with friends and focused on homework and actually thought about the future without it feeling impossible. Cecilia said this is what healing looks like, not forgetting what happened or being unchanged by it, but learning to carry the experience without letting it crush you. I didn't know if I believed that yet, but I was trying. Anne and I filled out college applications together at the library, both of us picking schools within an hour of each other, because neither of us wanted to be alone after everything. Antonio got accepted to a state school 3 hours away, but we made him promise to visit and stay in the group chat no matter what. The survivors group met one last time before summer, and we talked about starting chapters at our colleges to help other students dealing with trauma. Someone suggested we could do presentations about what helped us heal and what didn't. Turn our experience into something that might prevent other people from suffering alone like Josh did. Cecilia sat in on that meeting and told us she was proud of how we were channeling our pain into helping others, that this kind of purpose-driven healing was powerful and lasting. On the last day of school, I got there early and walked through the empty hallways before anyone else arrived. The memorial garden in the courtyard had flowers blooming around Coach Henderson's and Tyler's benches, their names etched in metal that would last longer than any of us. The bullet holes in the hallway walls had been patched and painted over, but I could still see exactly where they were, could still hear the sounds that made them. I stopped outside the chemistry lab and looked through the window at the desks arranged differently than they were that day, at Mr. Navarro setting up for his first period class like it was any normal morning. I thought about Josh sitting in a prison cell, and Coach Henderson who never got to retire, and Tyler who never got to graduate, and all of us survivors carrying scars nobody could see. I couldn't change what happened or take back the fight at lunch or erase Josh's choices or bring back the people he killed. But I could choose how I moved forward from here. I could remember that I tried to help during the lockdown, that I told the truth in court, that I was working on healing even when it felt impossible. I could believe that someday the weight would feel lighter and the nightmares would come less often, and I could think about building tree houses with Josh without it being poisoned by what he became. Standing in that hallway, I chose hope even though it was hard, because the alternative was letting one terrible day define the rest of my life, and I refused to give it that power.